It was raining the night Clara Rourke disappeared, one of those heavy, relentless downpours that makes the world feel like it's dissolving at the edges. In the quiet suburban neighborhood of Brook Hollow, lights flickered, thunder cracked, like a gunshot overhead, and inside 109 Ashbury Lane, Ethan Rourke dialed 911 with a strangely steady hand. "My wife's gone," he told the dispatcher. "She's missing." His voice was flat, emotionless. Not trembling, not broken. The officer on the other end asked the usual questions. When did he last see her? Any known mental health issues, signs of a struggle? No, nothing like that, Ethan replied. She just wasn't here when I got back from work. That was a lie. He hadn't gone to work that day. He'd called in sick. No one else knew that yet. Earlier that evening, neighbors remembered seeing Clara through the kitchen window, washing dishes, her hair pulled up, sleeves rolled back. The scent of rain mixed with lemon soap drifted into the yard. Everything looked normal from the outside. But inside that house, something had already broken, something old and fragile that had finally collapsed under years of silence. Resentment and secrets. Ethan and Clara were high school sweethearts once. They married young. At first, they were the couple everyone envied. But behind closed doors, the story was different. She had dreams of art school and coastal cities. He wanted a quiet life in the same town that raised him. By year 5, they barely spoke without it turning cold. By year 7, Claire stopped painting. By year 10, she barely looked him in the eyes. "You think I don't know about her?" she had said the night before. Her voice shook, not with fear but rage. Jessie, the gym girl. Ethan didn't deny it. He just stared at her, blank, tired. "You ruined me," she whispered. "And now you're just waiting for me to disappear." He didn't answer, because in his head, that idea had already begun to bloom. The police arrived within the hour. A cruiser parked under the leaking streetlight. Casting red-blue flashes into the puddles, Officer Daniel Price took the lead. A rookie, green, but eager. "Mr. Rourke, how long have you and Clara been married?" 10 years. "Any history of violence? Mental illness?" "No." "Did she leave a note? Take anything with her?" Ethan shook his head. "Her purse is still here. Her phone too. Inside the bedroom. Clara's side of the closet was untouched. Her toothbrush still sat next to his. No signs of packing. No signs of chaos. No blood. No struggle. Nothing. It was almost too clean outside. A neighbor named Mrs. Adler stood under an umbrella, peering across the street. "I saw their lights flickering earlier," she told Officer Price. "But I didn't hear anything. Not a sound." "What about arguments? Any trouble between them?" She hesitated. "They weren't exactly warm. But you never expect something like this." Inside the house, Ethan sat on the edge of the couch, unmoving, staring at the rain tapping the windows like fingers trying to get in. His shirt was damp. His shoes were muddy. But no one asked why. Officer Price filed the report. A bolo was issued. Search teams were scheduled to start at dawn. Clara Rourke was officially classified as a missing person. Later that night, long after the cops left, Ethan sat alone at the kitchen table. He lit a cigarette with shaking hands, a habit he'd quit 5 years earlier. The house was silent. To silent. He glanced at the doorway to the basement, then at the back door, where muddy boot prints led out toward the woods behind their property. Prints no one had noticed. He closed his eyes, breathed in the smoke, and whispered her name like a prayer. Clara. But prayers don't work on the dead. Across town, Detective Maria Vega received the alert. Another missing woman. Another cold husband. Another rainy night. She closed her notebook, grabbed her coat, and muttered to herself, "Something's wrong here." She was right, and by the time she figured out how wrong, it would already be too late. The woods behind Ethan's childhood cabin were dense and damp. The kind of place where sounds disappeared and time twisted. Twigs cracked underfoot, rain fell in. Cold sheets, somewhere nearby. An owl cried once, and then went silent. Ethan pulled the old shovel from the truck bed, its handle worn smooth from years of disuse. He moved like a man in a transcom, practiced, detached. He'd planned this, maybe not in detail, but in feeling, the resentment, the contempt it had been building for years. She had finally said the wrong thing, pushed 1 inch too far, and now, here they were. He stopped in a clearing, surrounded by leaning birches and thorned underbrush. The soil here was soft. He remembered that from when he was a kid, playing pirates with his brother, buried a time capsule here once. Now, he was burying something else or someone. Ethan opened the top. Clara's face was pale, her eyes shut, lips parted slightly like she might speak at any moment. There was no blood now. He had cleaned her, scrubbed the kitchen floor, stuffed her phone into the garbage disposal. She looked peaceful, almost angelic. But Ethan couldn't bring himself to look at her for long. He dug. The rain made it easier. The shovel sliced into the earth like it had been waiting all these years. You never listen. Clara had shouted, just hours earlier, "You want control. You don't want a wife, you want a damn ghost." That word stuck with him. Ghost. He struck a root and hacked at it, not caring if the blade chipped. His knuckles bled. His breath came hard, but he didn't stop until the hole was deep enough. Lowering her in was the hardest part. Not physically, emotionally. There was a pause, a second where the world itself seemed to hold its breath. He felt something twist in his chest, a sick emptiness, and then he dropped her. Just like that, he covered the grave in silence. No words, no prayer, just soil and rain and shame. When it was done, he stood over the spot for a brief, haunting second. He thought he saw her fingers move just a twitch, his mind playing tricks on him. Still, he froze, heart slamming. Nothing. He picked up the shovel, and turned back toward the truck. The storm covered his tracks. No headlights, no witnesses. No one knew he ever left. By the time Ethan returned home, his hands were raw. The mud under his fingernails had turned to bloodied grit. He washed in silence, threw the clothes into the fireplace, and waited. When Officer Price knocked, Ethan's face was already practiced, calm, detached. He played the role of the grieving husband. No overacting, just enough. He answered every question, offered coffee, kept eye contact. "I just want her found," he said. I don't understand." The officer nodded, scribbled into his notebook, and left. And just like that, the lie began. Days passed, posters went up, candlelight vigils were held. Friends brought casseroles. The local newspaper ran a front-page article. "Beloved art teacher missing after storm." Detective Maria Vega came by once. Unannounced, her questions were sharper. Her eyes lingered on the fireplace, on the backyard, on Ethan's hands. "You said you got home from work around 6. She asked. "That's right. No one at the school remembered seeing you." Ethan didn't flinch. "I wasn't feeling well." Called out last minute. She gave him a long look. Of course. Then she left. Ethan knew she'd be back. He knew because her eyes were the kind that didn't stop digging. But he was ready. He had buried Clara. He had burned the clothes. He had told the story well enough. He had buried the truth. Also, he thought. Because beneath the wet earth of that forest clearing, Something had stirred, something that refused to stay dead. 3 days after Clara's disappearance, the town had already moved into ritual. Flyers on lamp posts, news anchors repeating the same lines, search dogs pacing the edges of the woods. But nothing turned up. It was like she had dissolved into the storm dot at the precinct. Her name was just one of many on a growing list of cold cases. But on Detective Maria Vega's desk, it was circled in red. She'd been doing this long enough to know when something was off. Ethan Rourke's story had too many clean edges, his wife missing. No break-in, no blood, no trace, but also no emotion. He never asked about no leads, never called to check in, never cried. She pulled up his employment file, a column on the day Clara vanished, but no record of that in his phone log. He claimed he'd emailed. No email was ever found, still. There was no physical evidence, no motive she could prove, and no body, which meant no case. Vega stepped into her captain's office with the preliminary file. "I think the husband's lying," she said bluntly. Captain Ortiz looked up from his sandwich. "They always are. Doesn't mean we can book him. He claims he came home from work and she was gone. But he never showed up at school. No one saw him. And he's to come. Something's wrong with him. You got blood. You got footage. You got a confession." Vega didn't answer. "Exactly. Until then, we don't got a case. File it and move on." She did file it. But she didn't move on. Back at Ethan's house, the casserole dishes were stacking up. Friends from the neighborhood came and went. Everyone said the same thing. "If you need anything, just say the word." But Ethan didn't need anything. He needed them gone. Each knock on the door felt like an echo from the grave. Each question felt like a crack in his armor. Had the police found anything? Jessie asked one night, her voice tentative. She wasn't his lover yet, not officially. But there was something in the way she stayed after others left, the way she touched his shoulder longer than needed. "No," he said, pouring wine. "Nothing at all." She looked at him. "Do you think she just ran away?" He forced a hollow laugh. "Maybe she finally had enough of me." But her eyes didn't leave his, and somewhere in him a flicker of doubt sparked for the first time since that night. The official story was set in stone by the end of the week. Missing person. No confirmed foul play. Case inactive unless new evidence surfaces. Vega hated the phrase. Inactive didn't mean over. It meant forgotten until something forced it back to the surface. She drove by the Rourke property once more before closing the file. It was dusk. Lights were on. Ethan stood on the porch smoking. Their eyes met for less than a second. Long enough for Vega to know he was watching her, too. She wrote one final note in her case log before locking the drawer. "Don't trust the quiet ones. They bury more than bodies," and just like that, the case of Clara Rourke disappeared from public view, quietly archived and left to collect dust. But time is strange when the truth is buried. It doesn't stay still. FESTERS. It waits, and 10 years later, the same porch light that had once watched a lie grow would flicker again. This time, for a woman who wasn't supposed to exist. 10 years passed, but the house on Ashbury Lane didn't change much. The siding faded, the oak out front thickened. But behind closed doors, time moved strangely. The walls remembered, the floorboards creaked in the same pattern. The basement air still held a damp chill, like the night it all began. Inside, Ethan Rourke had transformed, or at least that's what it looked like from the outside. He had remarried. Her name was Jessie Whitman, a fitness instructor 13 years younger, bright eyes, hopeful voice. always wearing the smile Clara used to fake. They met during one of his late-night gym sessions after the case went cold. After the whispers faded, she didn't ask too many questions, and he never offered answers. The town moved on. New families, new roads. Clara's name only came up in hushed nostalgia, like an unsolved riddle that no longer haunted the community. Ethan, now a respected member of the school board, lived a curated life, clean, polished, and touchable. Every Sunday, he mowed the lawn. Every Wednesday, he brought coffee to the school secretary. Every Friday, he and Jessie went to dinner at Brick and Ash, always ordering the same red wine Clara used to hate. They were expecting their first child in spring. On paper, Ethan had written his life, but paper burns easily. At night, when Jessie slept, Ethan wandered the house barefoot. Sometimes he ended up in the basement, staring at the storage closet. Other times, he stood in the backyard, watching the tree line where the woods began. He had dreams, dark ones, of dirt under his fingernails, of eyes opening in the dark, of fingers brushing up through the soil. "You okay?" Jessie asked one morning, noticing the dark circles under his eyes. "Didn't sleep well. Nightmares again." He nodded. Jessie reached for his hand. "It's probably just nerves. The baby. Work. Everything." He smiled. "Yeah, probably." He didn't tell her what he saw in the dream. Clara, standing at the foot of the bed, her hair matted and wet, her mouth full of soil. Jessie didn't know much about Clara, only what Ethan had carefully rehearsed. She left, he had said once, early in their relationship. Just walked away one day. She wasn't happy. I wasn't either. The police thought maybe suicide, or maybe she ran. No one ever found her. No closure. Jessie never pushed. Maybe because she saw pain in his eyes. Maybe because she didn't want to know what might be hiding in the shadows of a man she loved. But sometimes, when she caught him staring into nothing, whispering her name in his sleep, she wondered. Winter came early that year. The leaves browned too soon. The frost bit harder. Jessie started nesting, buying baby books and painting the nursery a soft green. Ethan stayed busy. He took on more hours, more committees, more anything to stay out of that house. He couldn't name what he feared, but it never left him. It walked beside him in the hallway. It stood behind mirrors. It slept between him and Jessie, quiet and cold. He told himself he had done what he had to do, that life owed him this second chance, that some truths needed to stay buried, but even lies that deep eventually rot. One night, just before Christmas, Jessie lit the fireplace while Ethan read in his chair. Snow fell gently outside. The world was quiet until someone knocked on the door. 3 slow knocks, measured, confident. Jessie stood, brushing ash from her sweater, probably the neighbors. But when she opened the door, she froze. A woman stood on the porch, thin, pale, wrapped in a coat that didn't fit. Her hair hung damp across her shoulders. Her voice was hoarse, but steady. "Is Ethan here?" Jessie blinked. "Who?" behind her. Ethan stood slowly. The book slipped from his hands. He stared, and Clara stared back. She didn't flinch when he stepped into view. Clara Rourke stood on the porch like time hadn't touched her, and yet it clearly had. Her skin was paler, thinner, drawn tight over her cheekbones. Her eyes were sunken, rimmed with something darker than exhaustion. But her posture was upright, firm. She had not come to beg. She had come to confront. Ethan's knees nearly gave out. "Clara," he whispered, his voice barely escaping his throat. Jessie turned to him, confused. "Ethan, you know her?" He couldn't speak. His mouth opened. But nothing came. His gaze remained locked on Clara, like if he blinked, she'd vanish again. "I need to talk to you," Clara said quietly. As you in moving. Jessie stepped halfway outside, and sure whether to shield or question. "Do you want to come in?" Clara shook her head. "Not yet. Just him." The wind bit cold through the open door. But Ethan didn't notice. The walls of the world had already fallen away. Inside the living room, Jessie stood frozen. She's your wife?" she asked finally, her voice shaking. "She's supposed to be dead," Ethan replied before thinking. It slipped out, raw and stunned. "I buried." He caught himself, but the damage was done. Jessie stared at him like she'd never seen him before. Clara stood just outside the door, still, watching. They sat on the porch steps, not speaking. Not yet. The air was cold. But Clara didn't shiver. Ethan's heart pounded in his ears. Every second felt like a weight pressing down. "You were supposed to be dead," he said. Clara turned toward him. "I know. I know. How are you?" "I came back," she said simply. "Because you still live here." Ethan's hands trembled. He folded them in his lap to hide it. "I checked," he said hoarsely. "I checked the body, no pulse, no breath. I buried you. You didn't check hard enough." In that moment, he remembered flashes his panic, the darkness, the rain, how fast he worked to cover it all. How he never went back to make sure. How did you get out?" he asked. Clara looked away. "That's a longer story than you deserve." His voice dropped to a whisper. "You don't understand. You pushed me. You said things I couldn't forget." She didn't respond. "I didn't mean to kill you," he added, almost to himself. Clara turned, her voice low. "But you meant to bury me." The silence that followed was louder than any scream. Inside the house, Jessie sat at the edge of the couch, hands clutched tightly around a glass of water. She watched them through the window. The way Ethan slumped, the way the strange woman, his wife, sat so calmly. And something in Jessie's chest twisted. The version of Ethan she knew, the charming teacher, the grieving husband. The soon-to-be father began to blur. What kind of man looks into the face of a ghost without falling apart? Clara stood up slowly. "I'm not here to tell the police," she said. "Not yet. I want you to live with what you did. Every minute. Every breath." "Why now?" Ethan asked, voice cracking. After all these years, she looked at the nursery window. The green curtains fluttered gently in the wind. "Because you're about to do it again." And with that, she turned and walked into the darkness. Ethan didn't move, couldn't, because for the first time in a decade, he was certain of one thing: he hadn't buried the past deep enough. The door clicked shut behind Ethan like the final note of a funeral march. Inside, Jessie stood near the fireplace, arms crossed tightly, eyes wide with something more than confusion, something closer to fear. Her voice was low but trembling. "Who was that woman?" Ethan didn't answer immediately. His throat was dry, his face pale. He walked past her without a word and poured himself a glass of water, spilling some as he raised it to his lips. Jessie followed him into the kitchen. "You said Clara was dead, that she disappeared." "She did," he said finally, not meeting her eyes. "I saw her. I thought." Jessie stepped back. "You thought what?" "Ethan." He didn't speak. She stared at him like she was trying to solve a riddle she didn't want the answer to. The rest of the night passed in a haze. Jessie locked herself in the guest bedroom, her hand resting on her stomach protectively. Ethan sat on the couch until dawn, the shadows on the walls shifting like Clara's silhouette. He didn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he heard her voice again. "Because you're about to do it again." What did she mean? What did she know? He couldn't shake the memory of her calm face. Her certainty, as if she'd planned this visit, as if she'd been watching. Had she been watching the next morning? Jessie emerged cautiously. Her face was puffy from crying, her expression unreadable. "I called my sister," she said. "I'm going to stay with her a few days." Ethan felt the panic rise. "Jessie, please." "No." She raised a hand. "I don't know who you are right now. I need space." She left without another word. The silence that followed was somehow worse than Clara's voice. Later that day, Ethan found himself in the attic somewhere he hadn't been in years. Dust coated everything. He opened an old trunk, pulling out memories he'd tried to forget. Clara's paintings, still vibrant despite the years, a canvas of the two of them at the lake, her hand in his, smiling, back when it meant something. He sat down on the floor, the painting in his lap, and whispered, "How are you alive?" Elsewhere in town, Detective Maria Vega sat at her kitchen table, sipping black coffee when the alert came in. A welfare check request, submitted anonymously, flagged with the name Clara Rook. Her hands froze mid-sip. She pulled up the old case, file from her encrypted drive, the one she'd refused to delete after retiring. 10 years, no leads, no closure. And now an anonymous tip. She tapped her pen on the table. Eyes narrowed. Clara's dead. Or someone wants me to believe otherwise. Either way, Vega knew one thing. It was time to pay Ethan Rourke a visit. That evening, Ethan returned from a walk to find an envelope on his porch. No postage. No name. Inside was a single photograph. Grainy, faint, a cabin. In the woods. And just visible in the corner what looked like a shovel stuck in the ground. Ethan's chest tightened. He hadn't told anyone where the cabin was, not even Clara. Or had he? He turned the photo over. One word was scrawled on the back in thick black ink. "Remember." The paper shook in his hands. Because he did. He remembered everything. And now someone else did. 2. The journal arrived 2 days later. Slipped under Ethan's front door while he was upstairs staring out the nursery window. A worn, leather-bound book, cracked at the spine and soaked along the edges. He knew it was hers. Before he even opened it, her handwriting danced across the cover in faint silver marker. "For the man who left me dead." His stomach dropped. He sat at the kitchen table, the same spot where he'd signed the police report 10 years ago, and flipped to the first page. The ink was shaky, and even as if written by someone learning to use their hands again. Day 1. I woke up in the dark. I couldn't breathe. The air was thick and rotting. My fingers hit wood, dirt. I screamed, but it was silent. My lungs burned. I thought, this is how it ends. I clawed until I couldn't feel my nails anymore. Then I passed out. Day 2. I woke up again. I heard birds whined. Someone opened the box. I didn't see their face, just light. I remember a voice. Male. Old. He carried me. I blacked out again. Evan's hands trembled as he turned the pages. The entries continued scattered. Dreamlike, a man named Jonas, an off-grid survivalist, found her buried near the edge of his property while checking traps. He never took her to the hospital. Never told anyone. Said he had his reasons. He believed she was sent to him, saved her, cared for her, kept her hidden. Clara didn't argue. She was too broken to resist, and too angry to die. Day 43. Jonas doesn't trust the world. I don't either. Day 78. I started to paint again. He built me a room. It smells like pine and mold. But it's quiet. Day 179. He asked me to stay. He needs me, and I need the silence. Years passed in silence. Jonas grew sick. Clara cared for him. And when he finally died of a heart attack in his sleep, she buried him in the same woods where Ethan had left her. She considered staying. But her rage had started to bloom again. Quietly, patiently. Year 9, month 4. I found Ethan online. He's alive. He's smiling. He has a new wife. A child on the way. I see no guilt in his face. I see the same man who stood over me and turned away. Ethan closed the journal, unable to keep reading. His hands were slick with sweat. His heart was racing. She had lived. Not just survived, but endured. And now, she was watching him. He stared at the envelope again. The photo of the cabin. The word remember. She wanted something, and she wasn't finished. That night, he burned the journal in the fireplace. Every page, every line. He told himself it was to protect Jessie, to bury the truth once and for all. But part of him knew it was fear. Because in those words, Clara had reclaimed her power, and Ethan had none left. Across town, Jessie sat in her sister's apartment, scrolling through articles. One caught her attention. Woman presumed dead reappears after 10 years refuses public statement. There was no photo, no confirmation, just speculation. But Jessie's got twisted. Something told her this wasn't over. Not for Ethan. Not for her. And definitely not for the woman in the journal. The next morning, Detective Vega stood outside Ethan's house, coat buttoned against the wind, her eyes locked on the front porch. She'd received the same photo. Same shovel, same woods. She knew what it meant. Time to start digging. Detective Maria Vega hadn't worn her badge in nearly 3 years, but old instincts never died. They just waited, and when the photo arrived at her doorstep with no return address, no note, just one word scrawled in red, remember. Those instincts flared back to life. The cabin in the image was familiar. She had seen it once in a blurry real estate record while digging through Ethan Rourke's family property history. A hunting shack left to him by his father. The location was never part of the official case file. He never mentioned it in interviews, but Clara had found it. That alone told Vega everything she needed to know. The Rourke case had haunted her even after she'd boxed it up and moved on. Something about Ethan's eyes so calm, to still, the way grief never reached his voice. The way he flinched when she mentioned Clara's paintings. And now, 10 years later, Clara Rourke was alive. Vega didn't know how, but she was certain of one thing. Dead women don't leave breadcrumbs. She arrived at Ethan's house just after sunrise. The porch was damp with dew. A newspaper lay untouched on the steps. She knocked twice. Ethan opened the door, startled to see her. Detective Vega. Maria, now retired. She smiled politely. But something tells me you've been expecting me. He hesitated, then stepped aside. Inside, the house was tidy. Jessie was gone. No signs of her presence except the nursery down the hall. Vega noticed the faint scent of smoke. The fireplace had been used recently. I heard Clara's alive, she said. Walking toward the living room, Ethan's face twitched. So the whole town knows now. No, she said calmly. Just me. And whoever sent that photo. He didn't ask what photo. That, too, told her something. I want to help, he said suddenly. Vega raised an eyebrow. Help who? He swallowed. Clara. If she's alive, she might need help. She's not well. Not well. Vega echoed. You tried to bury her, Ethan. He didn't respond. She sat across from him, pulling out an old leather notebook. Original case notes. The same red ink circled his name. Why didn't you ever mention the cabin in our interviews? He looked down. Didn't think it mattered. Vega leaned in. Clara thinks it matters. Silence stretched. Then Ethan cracked. She was dead. I swear. No pulse. No breath. I didn't mean to. He stopped himself, catching her gaze. You just meant to make sure no one found her. Vega finished. He nodded slowly. She stood. I'll need the keys to that cabin. That night, Vega drove out alone. The woods were colder than she remembered. The trees creaked like old bones. The path to the cabin was overgrown. But the structure still stood small, slanted, and quiet. She approached with caution. Inside, the air smelled of mildew and old smoke. A rusted kettle sat on the stove. A broken easel in the corner. On the wall, faint charcoal sketches, some of Ethan, others of a faceless man. Then she saw it. A painting, unfinished, tucked behind a crate. A woman underground, eyes wide. Mouth open in a silent scream. The signature at the bottom read, Clara. Vega exhaled. Clara hadn't just lived. She had remembered. She had documented. And she was building something. Something deeper than revenge. As Vega stepped back into the night. A twig snapped behind her. She spun round, hand near her coat pocket, but no one was there. Still, she felt a someone watching. Or waiting. The woman who emerged from the woods was not the Clara Rourke the world remembered. She walked with measured steps, shoulders squared, eyes forward. 10 years in the shadows had changed her. Her voice was steadier now. Her face unreadable. The storm hadn't washed her away, it had carved her into something sharper. Clara had become a ghost in her own life. But ghosts learn things, they listen. Unnoticed, they survive by watching the world that forgot them. And she hadn't just survived. She had learned everything. When Clara left Jonas's cabin, she didn't head for the police. She didn't seek justice. She sought control. She needed to understand the man who buried her. Ethan hadn't wasted time after her disappearance. Within months, he'd started dating Jessie. By year 2, his house was remodeled. By year 5, he was writing op-eds in the local paper about resilience through grief. Clara kept a journal of it all. Her second journal, one she didn't send. She called it The Life He Stole. In a motel room on the outskirts of town, she laid out everything. Photos of Ethan and Jessie in public, screenshots of his social posts, notes from conversations she'd overheard while sitting to tables away. She knew Jessie was pregnant. She knew they planned to move closer to Jessie's sister after the baby came. She knew Ethan kept the nursery door locked when Jessie wasn't home. And most importantly, she knew Ethan hadn't told her the whole truth. Clara suspected more than an affair. She suspected a pattern. One night, Clara returned to the woods, to the place where Jonas had found her. She dug beneath the pine needles and frost. She uncovered the original tarp Ethan had left behind, torn, weathered, but still stained with her. Truth nearby. She found something she hadn't noticed before, half buried in the mud. A ring. Gold, inscribed. But not hers, and not Ethan's. Her breath caught. She'd always assumed he'd buried her and moved on. Now she wasn't sure she was the only one. Across town, Detective Maria Vega studied the sketches in the cabin for the 3rd time. The faceless man, the screaming woman, the ring of trees. She opened her notebook and drew a line connecting Ethan's name to the word. Others. She picked up her phone. Hey, she said. It's Vega. I need you to pull all missing person reports in the last 15 years. Within a 30-mile radius, especially women. Cross-check any known connections to Ethan Rourke. There was a pause. Yes, she added. He's back on my board. Meanwhile, Ethan sat alone in the nursery. He hadn't spoken to Jessie since she left. She hadn't called. hadn't texted. The walls round him were painted soft green, the crib built by his own hands. Yet the room felt far now, as if something had already claimed it. The past was uncoiling, inch by inch, and somewhere Clara was pulling the thread. That night, Clara mailed a single item to Jessie Whitman's sister's house, no note. No explanation. Inside the envelope was a photo of the ring, and a single question written in Clara's careful hand. "Do you know who you're sleeping next to?" Jessie opened it in the kitchen while her sister rocked gently in the next room. Humming lullabies, she stared at the ring. Her blood ran cold, because she did recognize it. But it didn't belong to Clara, and it didn't belong to her daughter. It belonged to a woman named April Carlin, her childhood friend, who vanished 7 years ago without a trace. Jessie's hands trembled as she stared at the photo of the ring. Her mind raced back to childhood memories of April Carlin, her best friend, her secret keeper, the friend who vanished without a trace 7 years ago. The realization hit her like ice water. Ethan's secret was bigger than she imagined. She sat down heavily at the kitchen table, heart pounding. Buried twice. That's what Clara meant. Not just buried under dirt, but buried under lies. Again. Meanwhile, Clara sat alone in a small motel room, watching the rain slide down the grimy window. The shadows in the room matched the heaviness in her chest. She had uncovered Ethan's dark past, but this new truth twisted the knife. April Carlin wasn't the first nor the last. Detective Maria Vega pored over old files she had pulled from cold case archives. Names, dates, circumstances. A pattern emerged. Women connected to Ethan. Women who disappeared quietly. No bodies found. No witnesses. Just silence and a ring. Back at Ethan's house. The walls felt like they were closing in. He paced the living room, wringing his hands. The photo, the journal, the unrelenting past. It was suffocating. He had thought burying Clara would bury everything. But the earth doesn't keep secrets forever. That night, Jessie confronted Ethan in the dim light of their kitchen. "Who is April Carlin?" she demanded, voice shaking. Ethan looked away, struggling for words. "She was someone I knew," he began, voice low and cautious. Jessie cut him off. "You knew more than that. She disappeared the same way Clara did. You were close to both of them. How many more lives are tangled in your lies?" The silence between them screamed. Clara, miles away, made a decision. She was no longer just a ghost waiting to be seen. She was a force. She would bring light to every dark corner Ethan had hidden in. But to do that, she needed help. She called Detective Vega. The line was silent at first. Then a voice, Maria Vega. Clara's voice was steady, determined. "I have information about Ethan Rourke, about the women, about the lies." Vega listened closely, heart pounding. As the call ended, Clara glanced round the motel room. Her fingers brushed over the journal's worn cover. She whispered, "This time, you won't bury me again." That same night, Maria sat at her desk, reviewing the notes from the call. She stared at the growing list of names tied to Ethan. The shadows in the room deepened as the storm outside raged on. She knew this was only the beginning. Detective Maria Vega stood in the rain-drenched woods just outside the cabin, her boots sinking slightly into the soft earth. The storm had passed, but the ground remained slick and cold. The scent of pine and damp soil filled the air, a reminder that nature holds memory longer than people do. She scanned the perimeter with a flashlight, eyes sharp for anything out of place. Months of research, the anonymous tips, Clara's journal, it all pointed to this exact spot, a place Ethan had hoped would stay hidden forever. The shovel was still there, half buried near a cluster of old oaks. Vega knelt and brushed the dirt away. revealing a faded patch of disturbed earth. She crouched lower, pulling gloves from her pocket. Every movement was careful, deliberate. Her hands broke the surface, unearthing a small, rusted metal box sealed tight. Heart pounding. She pried it open. Inside were photographs, old, grainy, yellowed at the edges, images of women, some smiling, some scared, some who looked eerily familiar. Among them was a picture of April Collin, her eyes wide and hopeful. Beside it, a photo of Clara, taken years before her disappearance, standing beside Ethan, both unaware of the camera's gaze. Vega's mind raced. The evidence was undeniable. Ethan had buried more than Clara. He had buried the truth, the women. The lies. Back in town, Ethan sat alone, staring blankly at the ceiling. His phone vibrated, flashing Jesse's name. He ignored it. Memories clawed at him. Clara's accusations, Jesse's distrust, the journal burning in the fireplace, and now Maria's relentless pursuit. He had created a web he couldn't escape. Elsewhere, Clara met with Detective Vega in a quiet cafe. Their eyes met over steaming cups of coffee. "I need your help," Clara said softly. Vega nodded. "We're finally unearthing the past. But it's going to get worse before it gets better." Clara swallowed hard. "I'm ready." Together, they pieced together fragments: missing persons reports, old police interviews, whispered town rumors. They discovered women who vanished after crossing Ethan's path. Women whose disappearances had been dismissed or overlooked, and the silent complicity of those who refused to see. One name stood out: April Collin. Her file was marked cold for years, until Clara's return rekindled interest. Vega uncovered a witness who remembered a heated argument between April and Ethan months before she disappeared, and a man, unknown to the town, who had been seen near the cabin on several occasions. The puzzle was incomplete, but pieces were shifting. Clara's second life wasn't just survival, it was a mission. A quest for justice and vengeance. That night, Clara returned to the cabin alone. She knelt beside the freshly disturbed earth and whispered, "You won't bury me again." She looked up at the sky. Dark but clearing. Stars peered through the clouds. For the first time in years, she felt hope. Meanwhile, Ethan packed a small bag, his hands shaking. He glanced once more at the nursery, the room that had turned from a symbol of hope to a tomb of secrets. He knew his time was running out. And soon the past would finally catch him. The air in the interrogation room was thick, suffocating. Ethan sat stiffly in the metal chair, fingers gripping the edge of the table like a lifeline. Across from him, Detective Maria Vega's eyes bored into his. Steady and unyielding. "You lied," she said simply. 4 years, not just about Clara, but about all of them. Ethan's jaw clenched. "I did what I had to." "Who was April Collin to you?" He swallowed hard, gaze dropping to the table. "She was someone I cared about." "Care doesn't explain disappearance after disappearance. The lies, the silences." Maria's voice softened, but remained firm. "You buried more than bodies, Ethan. You buried lives, secrets, truths that are clawing their way back." Ethan's breath hitched. "You don't understand what it was like. Try me." He closed his eyes briefly. "Clara was unstable. We fought. She threatened to ruin me. She was your wife." Maria reminded him. "She was also my torment." His voice cracked. "I didn't mean for any of it to happen." Maria leaned forward. "Then why the burial? Why the silence?" A long pause. Finally, Ethan spoke, voice barely above a whisper. "Because I was scared of losing everything. Scared that the truth would destroy me. And now I'm trapped by my past, by the lies." The door creaked open. Clara stepped in, calm but resolute, her eyes locked onto Ethan's. "You buried me once," she said softly. But I survived, and I came back for justice. Ethan looked away, unable to meet her gaze. Jessie followed, holding her newborn tightly. Her face was a mixture of fear, anger, and something deeper betrayal. "You lied to me," she said quietly. To all of us, Claire's voice grew stronger. "You thought you could erase us. But the past doesn't stay buried. It claws its way to the surface." Maria stood, motioning for the officers. "This ends now." Evan's shoulders sagged. The weight of yours crushed him. Outside the station, the media had already caught wind of the developments. Flashes of cameras, murmurs of disbelief. Clara, Jessie, and Maria moved together united. Later, Clara spoke to reporters, her voice steady. "I'm not just a victim. I'm a survivor, and I'm here to make sure no one else is buried in silence." Jessie held her baby close, tears glistening. Maria watched, knowing justice was no longer just a word, it was happening. But beneath the surface, Evan's mind churned with fear. What else could still be buried? What truths were waiting in the shadows? As the sun set, Claire looked toward the horizon. Her journey was far from over. But this confrontation was the first step toward the light. The courtroom was packed, every seat taken. Every whisper hushed as the judge entered. Cameras flashed, capturing the moment that had gripped the town for over a year. Ethan Rourke, once a man cloaked in charm and lies, sat shackled, his eyes dull and empty. Across the room, Claire stood tall, no longer the scared woman buried beneath years of darkness, but a survivor who had clawed her way back into the light. Jessie held her child close, her face a mix of sorrow and strength. Detective Maria Vega watched quietly, knowing justice was never simple. But today it had a chance. As the prosecutor laid out the chilling details, the buried bodies, the decades of deception, the women erased by Ethan's greed and fear, Claire listened. Each word was a victory, each revelation a step toward healing. When it was her turn, Claire spoke without hesitation. "I was buried alive both in earth and in silence, but I refused to disappear. I fought to reclaim my voice, my truth. This isn't just my story. It's for every woman whose story was buried too." The courtroom erupted in applause, a wave of emotion flooding the room outside. As the verdict was read guilty on all counts, Clara felt her weight lift. Years of nightmares and secrets were finally unshackled. Jessie stepped forward, offering Clara a gentle smile. "Thank you for giving us all the courage to face the truth." Maria nodded, her eyes gleaming. "This is only the beginning of healing." That night, Clara returned to the cabin one last time. The forest was quiet, the air crisp and clear. She placed a single white rose on the earth, a symbol of peace and remembrance. Looking up at the stars, she whispered, "You buried me once, but I rose. I am not your victim, I am your reckoning." In the months that followed, Ethan's name faded from the headlines, replaced by stories of survival and justice. Jessie raised her child with fierce love, building a future free from shadows. Maria returned to active duty, determined to unearth other hidden truths. And Clara, she started a foundation helping women find their voices before they, too, could be silenced. The past had been dark and cruel, but from its ashes, hope was born, and in that hope, they found their power.